Hi, I'm Michelle Segrest, and welcome to the Factory of the Future podcast. This podcast is inspired by my 3-volume book series on the evolution of modern manufacturing. Each episode features engaging conversations with game-changing experts discussing the processes and innovations that are changing the landscape of modern manufacturing. Thank you so much for listening. Please do me a favor and leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes and take just a couple of seconds to leave a review. And then go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss a single episode. Hey everyone, I have a fascinating topic and a great guest for you today. I can't wait to have this discussion about the latest and greatest advancements in augmented reality. In recent years, manufacturing and industrial enterprises have been challenged by the knowledge gap left behind by retiring workers, recently exacerbated by a severe reduction in available staff due to COVID. Meanwhile, advances in mobile and wearable camera technology have offered some solutions to these challenges. This conversation is about one such technology, augmented reality, and how it addresses the challenges of the knowledge gap and staff reductions for industry. It's my pleasure to bring Bob Meads onto the show today, but first I want to tell you just a little bit about him. Bob has worked in the manufacturing automation industry for more than 25 years. He specializes in SCADA and industrial application development. When he's not brewing beer in his basement, he serves as CEO of iQagent, Inc., which is a plant floor augmented reality app. He is also the CEO of iQuest, which is an automation, integration, and engineering company. And as a special treat today, you're going to get 2 Southern accents because Bob also has some roots in Alabama. This, I know, is a topic that is very important to our listeners. So let's get to it. Bob, welcome to the Factory of the Future podcast.
Hi, thank you, Michelle. I'm excited to be here. It's good to see you.
You too, and it's great to have you here. This is one of my favorite topics because I've always been fascinated by this concept of augmented reality. And I know that it's come a long way in recent years, and I can't wait to find out what's new. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your background and kind of how that background relates to manufacturing.
Okay, great. Well, I was in the Navy right out of high school. I was in submarines, which I really liked. It was an industrial environment. I thought it was very cool. And when I got out, I went to the plant floor as an electronics technician. That's what I was in the Navy. And so I got to see kind of all areas of how plants work and manage. I managed a group of electronics technicians. And then I was promoted into production engineering, and I got to see how manufacturing lines were laid out and put together. And electronics was kind of my first love, but then I got into actually writing software. This was in the early 90s. And I was presented a challenge we were building some of the first CD-ROM read and write devices. And I had to come up with a way to do manufacturing line testing, and this was all new technology. So I just kind of fell in love with the concept of the interface between software and hardware. And I didn't have a degree, so I ended up going to school to get a degree in computer science and electronics technology. And I did that. And then I went to work for Siemens, which is one of the very large automation companies. And I got to work with their SCADA department, WinCC. Absolutely loved it. Wonderful product. I still work with it today. And then, they moved operations to New Jersey, which, from the Southern point of view, is a different country with different languages and customs. And sure. I didn't really want to go there, So I ended up starting iQuest and getting into, manufacturing and helping solve plant floor problems. And, as we have this discussion today, you'll see that, the product that we've developed, iQagent, is really an answer to those problems that we first really started seeing back on the plant floor in the early 90s.
That's so interesting. And I just want to comment quickly. My grandfather was also a submarine man
Oh,
in
that's
the
awesome.
Navy. So that kind of touched my heart just a little bit hearing that part of it. He was a radio man, so a radio communicator. So
Wow.
totally with
That's
Morse code, so total different kind of communication than we talk about today. His mind would be blown, I think, by augmented reality.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
what were some of the early problems that you saw? Like when you said that you started to see these problems on the plant floor that could be solved with technology. Can you give us an example of one of those? And
Absolutely. The plant that I worked in had 5 production lines, and they were 2 buildings. So there's 3 in one, 2 in the other. They're about a quarter mile apart. And my job was to keep production running. And so I would hear my name, being announced, over the general announcement system, and wanting me to come to a line. Now, what they didn't say was, "Hey, this particular piece of equipment is down," or "Here's exactly what you need to bring with you." They just, "Hey, get to this line so you can get production back up." So it would probably take me 10 or 15 minutes to get to the line, and then I had to figure out what was going on and what was wrong. That took me some more time. And then I had to walk away from that problem and go get the stuff that I need now that I know, what's wrong, and have an idea of kind of what I need. So all told, it might be 30 minutes or an hour. Now, if production's down, we're talking about an hour of downtime. And that is a lot of money for any, manufacturing plant. That number, how many dollars per minute that downtime is costing you, that's not something that you want to do. So one of the problems was, having information where you need it the most, which is, right in front of the equipment. That was kind of the number one, and a related problem that we see in manufacturing plants. And this comes about because of the way manufacturing lines are built. They're built in layers. You've got your industrial network, and then you've got your PLC network with your IO, which is reading and controlling information, and then you have your visualization, and you have all these layers. That means that you've got a lot of different equipment, a lot of different applications, which means if you want to get a complete picture, say, of a pump or a motor, the maintenance information is back in the maintenance shop, and the information on what it's doing right now is sitting in the PLC, and how it's doing production is sitting, somewhere in a production database. So you've got information spread out in all these plant systems, and it's hard to really get a complete picture of what's going on without running around and looking at all these systems. So those are two of the biggest problems. And they were, back then there was not a solution. And sometimes a problem stares you in the face so long every day that you cease to recognize it as a problem. And you just accept it as, this is what it is.
Right, right. So there are a lot of different definitions of augmented reality. And there's also a lot of examples, just real world examples that anybody, even if you're not in manufacturing, can recognize and understand. So tell us what your definition of augmented reality is. And then also maybe give us a few examples that we would recognize just from our daily lives.
Sure. Well, people tend to think when you hear augmented reality, some people tend to confuse it with virtual reality, which is something that is very different. Virtual reality is really just a self enclosed world. Augmented reality, I think the best definition I've ever heard is it is simply computer generated information that is placed directly in context to the real world. Now, that's a lot of big words, but I'm going to give you a very simple example.
Okay.
For those of us that watch football, and this has been around a while, if you watch football, you see a group of guys, you actually see 2 groups of guys. And when they're getting ready, to line up and move the ball, a yellow line shows up. And that is the first down line. That's the line they have to get to. Now, they don't tell you that. It's not written on that line, but we understand because of the context of the situation. Hey, there's 2 football guys, and, in front of that, there's this yellow line. We know intuitively that that is the line that they have to get to. And that is really what augmented reality is placing information directly in the context of a situation so that it has more meaning and it's more helpful. Now, on the plant floor, a little bit more detailed, I guess, example, but one that people will acknowledge is, let's say that we have a motor or a pump that's running. Because of the way manufacturing plants are built, a lot of times you can be standing in front of a piece of equipment and not know what's going on with it, whether or not it's running, whether or not it's on or off, what alarms, because all this information is sitting on a SCADA system that may be in a control room, or it may be in an HMI panel that's several feet away. You don't know. You have to go somewhere else to find out what's going on with this motor. And so if we could, let's say that there is a pickup that shows line speed on a conveyor. And so you're looking at this conveyor rolling, and then there's this number kind of floating in air that says 300 feet per second. Intuitively, you're going to say, okay, well, this thing's rolling along at 300 feet per second. I might have a label on there that says roll speed, but, intuitively, we know that. We can even extend this into putting resources like videos or, data entry forms, things like that, in places that make sense around the machine, around the operator station, to give us information we need. And so this is one of the big things that AR is used for, is to convey information about equipment, provide training about equipment, and some of those things that help us alleviate the knowledge gap that we talked about.
Gotcha. Okay. So why is manufacturing such a great environment to use this kind of technology, to use AR technology?
Well, that's a great question. And I'm a little anecdote that I like to tell to kind of set this up.
That'd be great. We love anecdotes.
This is, Microsoft HoloLens. The HoloLens that Microsoft came out with, I think it was 2016. Mm-hmm. This was a mixed reality device, and it caused a lot of attention. And it's this big headset that you put on your head.
Right.
And it is incredible. I mean, you can do some really, really cool stuff with it. So when Microsoft announced this, we all watched, especially as developers, watched this. And on stage, the first thing that they showed was a video game. And it was called Robot Attack or something. But what you would actually see with this headset on when you start the game is cracks forming in your walls and robots pouring out of them, and you could shoot them with finger lasers. And it was awesome. I mean, it was just amazing, the detail and the tracking and the experience that you're in. And so, back then, it was looked at as, really a gaming thing and something for gamers. So in the meantime, between HoloLens 1 and HoloLens 2, which came out a year and a half or so ago, it was noticed that, we had Pokemon Go, which was an AR experience on, mobile devices that allowed you to kind of play this game. But having information in context of what's going on and having information that allow people to make decisions, manufacturing is a perfect environment because there's a lot of automation. There's a lot of machines. And if we were going to have a display panel to show us everything that we need, it would just be very busy. It would be, very hard. And especially if a worker is at a manufacturing station or if they're doing a job, you don't want them to have every single piece of information. You want them to have exactly what's needed, at that time. And so, the manufacturers or the solution providers, especially Microsoft, started to see that manufacturing had money for things that solved problems. Mm-hmm. And we were seeing this knowledge gap where skilled workers were leaving and the people left behind, we lost a whole library of information. And that leads to getting, having to do training. Well, sitting in a classroom, learning about how to change a filter, and then 6 months later, you forget that because you haven't used it. And now you're at a piece of equipment that needs a filter change. What do? You get to go find somebody that knows how to do it until you're proficient. But we can use AR to provide that information in context. Hey, sitting by the filter here, we can do this. So when Microsoft came out with the HoloLens 2, there was not a game in sight. Everything they showed had the context of manufacturing. They realized that the sweet spot was there, that if they could solve these problems, and there's actually a multitude of problems that AR can effectively solve, around the knowledge gap and around having operators perform at a higher level because they have the knowledge there and make less mistakes, without that. And so because of just the sheer amount of equipment, the sheer amount of skill needed, AR is a perfect fit for this. And kind of another anecdote that I use to illustrate this is a couple of years ago, my daughter got a car. It was a 2014 Toyota Corolla, and the headlight went out. And so I went to the auto parts store, or actually I went to a garage and just asked them how much it would cost. And it was going to cost a whole lot more than I was willing to pay. So I went to the auto parts store and I bought a headlight. And I went home and I went to YouTube and I looked up, how do I replace a headlight on a 2014 Toyota Corolla? And there were several videos. So I found one, I propped it up on the hood, I hit play, and I followed what the guy was saying. And when I was done, I only had one screw left over, but when I turned the switch, the light came on. And so that is a perfect example of someone who doesn't know how to do something, receiving information in context of the job right there, and having the ability to do that, because that's what people use YouTube for. That's almost the number one reason, other than entertainment, to use YouTube is look up how to do stuff. And this can, like I said, it can alleviate the knowledge gap. You can have less experienced operators perform at a higher level with less errors. And so it's a perfect match.
Yeah, it is a perfect match. And I've seen it used on the manufacturing floor. And it seems to me like it's kind of, in a lot of ways, it's replacing the operations manual in a lot of ways. So you get a virtual picture of what's in the operations manual rather than having to thumb through pages and follow steps. It shows it to you right on top of the equipment. Is that
and
augmented reality?
It's actually, you can pull the same information, because a lot of time these manuals are also electronic resources. So one option is to just pull that manual up. But another option is to, take chunks of that information and display it, at a time. Really what we do at iQagent, and one of the things that we talk about is, we want to decentralize how people consume data on the plant floor, because they're either going to go get a manual, or they're going to go back to their computer and look at a program, or they're going to go to the maintenance shop, or they're going to, go, somewhere else. We want to decentralize that, because when we have a piece of equipment, we want to make it the link to all the relevant information. We think of it as a point of interest, just like Google uses points of interest. We want to put points of interest out on the plant floor and then pull all the information from these systems and link it to the equipment instead of the other way.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So help me understand exactly how your company helps manufacturers with this. Like what exactly does this technology do? Like, do you create the virtual manual, or what exactly do you do? How do you play a role in getting this into manufacturing plants?
Well, iQagent itself, we call ourselves practical augmented reality. And what we do is we work on the point of interest concept. So a point of interest in a plant might be a pump, or it might be a motor. It could be a warehouse shelf. It could be the lunch menu. It could be anything where we have data. And what we do is we use QR codes, which is different than, some of these other vendors that use AR tags and things like that. And the reason that we use these QR tags, here's kind of an example here. I can use these and use existing technology to scan it. If I use an AR tag, it's, you can get a lot more precision, and it's a lot sexier, if you will. But that just became a custom application. That image has to be compiled into whatever you're using to publish, where a QR code does not. We actually have a patent on that process. But what we do is we know that the plant has the information. They've got the manuals. They've got the data in the PLC and things like that. So they'll create a point of interest for a piece of equipment, and you just drag and drop information, and it could be links to relevant documents on SharePoint, or we can house those documents. You can associate videos. We also have a workflow and form creator. You just, create your data entry, your inspection forms, and associate it with the equipment. Any of these resources that they have, you're kind of tying this all together. And then you just print the QR code out, the POI, if you will, and put it on the piece of equipment. Now, one of the challenges we've had is people say, well, okay, we already have this asset tag. I don't want to put another QR code out there. And so we have the capability to map the asset barcodes directly to the POI. You can just kind of put it up. And then you can map it and scan it, and then you have it. So the idea, the end use case is people can walk around the plant floor and just point their mobile device camera at a piece of equipment and get all the relevant information that they need to do their job, to service it, to diagnose it, to do whatever.
That was going to be my next question. So they take their smartphone or a tablet or something like that, and they just scan the QR code and the information pops up on the screen? Or do they need some sort of other piece of equipment to work it?
Well, that's the other thing about what iQagent does. You can use your iPhone or Android phone. You can use a tablet. Our flagship application is the iOS, but we also work on the RealWear HMT1 and Navigator headset, as well as the first edition HoloLens. And you don't have to do anything special. Once you create that POI and place it on the equipment, it'll work with any device. Now, we have several different applications. The first iQagent, we just call it iQagent, is more assisted reality rather than augmented reality. And assisted reality just means we're going to give you information and you're going to see stuff in the camera, plus the information, but it's not necessarily anchored. We also have, with the HoloLens and with iOS, we have the iQagent AR app where the QR code actually serves as an AR anchor. And so you scan it and it will place an anchor where the QR code is. And then you can actually place bits of information in context of the machine. So I could put a video right by the filter that hangs in space, and you can play it and it will show you how to change the filter. Or I can place a piece of data like a roll speed, an inspection form, or an operations manual right where you would want it. And this is called an AR scene. And so depending on your device and depending on the app you use, you get a different experience. And, the AR app is really nice and it's really cool. But here's the point about augmented reality. If I'm using, say, a phone or a tablet, and I'm looking at this scene and stuff's floating in space, it's cool, but both my hands are encumbered.
Right.
I can't work.
Exactly.
So I'm holding a tablet. And so one of the things that we really need with AR to make it truly user-friendly is the ability to do this hands-free. Now, we were doing this with a HoloLens, but the HoloLens was as good as it was first generation. It was big. It didn't have all the safety requirements that some plants wanted. It didn't have the battery life. HoloLens 2 was a lot closer. And so, you could do that for a limited time. Now, the RealWear headset basically fits like this, and we've got a view screen here. This allows you the best of both worlds. It's assisted reality, and this is all voice driven. So I could have the RealWear headset scan the POI. It's displaying information sitting in a screen just below my eye, but it gives you the visual real estate of a 7-inch tablet. So you can interact with this data. You can actually read documents. You can see data. And they also have other applications for remote mentoring. So I guess in short, what we've done is we've created a very simple enterprise application that will really work with any hardware without having to publish or having to update. You just put it out there. It kind of works across the board, and it gives you the information that you need to do your job. So, we also like to say a lot of companies, they recognize that augmented reality is very important. So they have an augmented reality budget. Right. And if you're going with, if you're going with a solution where you have to develop this in-house, you can spend a lot of money very quickly, and then you end up with a solution that works on one piece of equipment using one mobile device. And so with us, we don't really, because we've decentralized it, because we use QR codes, you can do an AR pilot a lot cheaper and a lot faster with a lot less risk. So
Okay.
if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And I'm just wondering, so when a manufacturer calls you and says, hey, look, we would like to have this technology on some of our equipment, do they call you and then you come over and do an assessment? And how long does the whole process take to actually set this up and get it up and running?
That's a great question because, that's one of the challenges any new technology has getting into a plant. If I'm selling PLCs or if I'm selling wrenches or whatever, I know they're going to buy one. They know they're going to buy one. It's just, can I convince them to buy mine? But this is something different. So we kind of have to prove that we're going to provide ROI, and we also have to alleviate their concern that they're going to have to spend a ton of engineering time to get this working. And so usually the way that I approach it is, number one, you don't have to eat the elephant, all at once.
Right. One bite at a time, right?
Exactly. And so the biggest thing is, do you have your resources organized? Are your documents on SharePoint? Are they organized nicely? Or are they on a shared drive? If, the SCADA data points, do they have good naming conventions so you can identify what equipment, things like this. We look at this. We look at wireless coverage. We look at the mobile devices that they want to use. So, some people may need a hands-free solution. We like to go with RealWear right now. Sometimes they already have tablets, and so we look at that. But the beauty of iQagent in the deployment is it installs in less than 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
We install on premises. You just hit install. It sets it up for you. You can actually create a POI within a couple of minutes and then see it on 4 different devices. And so usually what I tell them is, let's get it installed and let's identify the resources that you use the most, that most people are going to use, especially if it's regulatory compliance or stuff like this. Just go out and get, say the 20 documents out there on the stations or on the equipment where they're needed, put the data points where they're at, and go ahead and get people used to using it. And then once the system's out there, then you take the next 10% and the next 10%. Because the perception sometimes is that, wow, it's going to take us 3 months to do that.
Right.
To completely put this whole thing in there. But the reality is we could probably do 10% of it very quickly and give them a ton of ROI immediately, and then come back and finish up if we have. So if it's like I had a large automotive customer and they paid me to do everything. They would give me access to SharePoint, and I basically wrote a script to just kind of index and create the links. I could create the POIs on the fly. They had 8,000 points of interest, each one with about 10 or 11 documents. And I could do it in about a week, but then I would go to the plant. They actually paid me to go put the QR codes out on the equipment. And that's what took more time. But for a really big installation, it can be, kind of broken up. It just depends on their specific circumstances, but you don't the beauty of this is you don't have to be a developer or a programmer to go out and create these. You just have to know a little bit about your plant structure and how to use a computer. And it's very, very intuitive.
That's great. So a manufacturing plant can get some instant gratification with one small application and then scale up from there. I can see how perhaps a small to medium-sized company could slowly incorporate this into their systems. And so it's not just for big, huge manufacturers with huge augmented reality budgets.
Right.
Just about anybody can use it.
Yeah, it is. And we actually go after, we are actually in some pretty big companies, but, there's this term plant digitalization, which really just means, are we using paper forms? Are you utilizing mobile devices? And there's a lot of benefit in this. And, a lot of the bigger automation companies, they have this concept of a digital twin where you've completely got your process digitized and
Of
you can,
course. Yeah.
you can do this, but that costs a lot of time and a lot of money. It's fantastic. But small companies and medium companies who are still on paper forms, that's not really an option for them to spend that money. So a lot of your bigger AR vendors and things like that are going after the bigger companies with the bigger budgets. We actually help you get digitized, and we give, you get that base layer of, hey, I'm going to get you using mobile devices in your processes every day. We're going to help you organize and get your electronic resources out there so you can use it. We're going to get more use out of your SCADA system and out of your document management system. And then later, once you have all this, then if you want to go to these other technologies, then we're very, compatible with them. But, that's another differentiator for us is we are for those plants, even the smaller and medium sized ones, budget wise and functionality wise, we can really give them ROI day one.
Do you give them kind of a consultation in the beginning to sort of assess where their needs are and what would be the most appropriate place to start that would give them the most ROI from the start?
Sometimes we do, but the thing about iQagent that we've really tried to foster is you can really understand what it does in 20 seconds. And I lead out by having a piece of information with a QR code, and I scan it and say, okay, here's all the information. They just get it. And so usually they're telling me how they want to use it before I'm done really talking about the demo. And so, it is an off-the-shelf product. There are a lot of customers who buy a license, download the software, and then, I don't hear from them, because, they're just kind of going off and doing their own thing. Then I have other customers that, maybe have some more, kind of complex needs. They have some special functionality, or they have a big job and they want somebody to kind of help them, attack it. And I can certainly do that. When we sell iQagent, I usually give them a couple of, free hours of engineering and consultation to just kind of talk to them about it.
Sure. Yeah, that's helpful.
So it's, so it's kind of, well, that we want them, to be successful with it. We're all, very passionate about what we do.
Right.
And so we want them to also be successful.
Has there ever been a situation where a company came to you with what they wanted for a solution, but you came up with something that was even better idea that they had not even thought of?
Yeah, we've, a lot of the later features that we've added was in direct response to customer challenges. So, we started out with the concept of a point of interest where you can connect, your live process data or your documents or your, schematics. And then, then we started getting, hey, we need to be able to go connect to this, this form wizard over here, or this, application that allows you to do data entry. And one of the struggles with that is a lot of the industrial form applications out there, they're very difficult to use because they're trying to do all this, really extended functionality, which is fine, because there's a lot of processes that need multiple sign-offs and they need all this stuff. But the vast majority of, forms that are filled out could be a simple inspection form. And it's really just, hey, what's wrong? Show me a picture of what's wrong, draw a circle around what's wrong, enter in this data and hit submit. And so we actually created our own form and workflow generator, this drag and drop. And a lot of our customers, the people that fill out the forms that are used to looking at it, they can actually build the form themselves. So we added this functionality in to give them a way to solve the 70% of the data entry form requirements, so that they could just create them in our software and then just use them. And if they want to go connect to something else, that's proprietary or whatever, then we can help them do that as well. Another such instance is push notifications, where you may not be at the equipment when something goes wrong. You may not know that something goes wrong. And we've had a large customer come to us and say, can you connect with this system that they had that was, SMS based. Instead, we actually just added push notifications into our product. And so on a POI, when you add, say, an OPC data point, you can say, hey, this is a notification. And if it gets higher than this, notify these group of people by push notification and by email. So we put it right into the product, really, to make it a lot easier and a lot simpler, because there's a lot of SMS services out there, and every plant, may have kind of a different one. And we decided, there's a lot of customers that could actually use this. So we've tried to work and collaborate to add the features that make sense, that, amplify the product's value and ROI, because that's what sells on the plant floor.
Right,
the
of course.
flashy stuff doesn't sell.
That's
you
right.
have to show that you're solving some meaningful problems.
It's easy to sell things like this to the operators because it makes their life easier, but it's difficult to sell it to management sometimes. You have to really convince them using the ROI.
Well, you do, because, and what you said is true. I can sell to an operator and I can sell to an engineer, but neither one of them have a budget.
That's right.
So they can't give me money. And so, you have to talk to them, but, the management, the people with the budget have to be convinced. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying. They know that they're going to buy a PLC or a wrench, but I have to convince them to buy something that they don't already have.
Right.
And they have to just see that the ROI is going to be there, so that, they can make that decision. Now, I will say that, of as bad as COVID has been, it's actually been good in a way to accelerate technology to alleviate some of the problems. And so, with wearable technology like HoloLens and RealWear, they all did pretty well during COVID, because the plant floor, there are a lot of people that just could not come to work. And so you're operating with a lot less staff, and they may not have the skills that they need. The experts are sitting at home. So technologies that are adjacent to AR, like remote mentoring, this has really pushed the adoption of wearables. And so, if I'm wearing a RealWear headset and someone can see through my camera and draw in my field of vision, hey, flip the switch right here, or this is what you need to do, then they can mitigate that problem where, the expert is not on the plant floor. They're sitting in a home office. And so COVID has really taught us how to kind of deal with this situation where, we have a reduced workforce. I think that the home workforce, I think COVID also taught us that there's a lot of job descriptions that can actually very effectively work from home with the right technology, where maybe that wasn't a consideration before. And this is good for, technology. It's good for, it's good for companies that have to deal with brick and mortar buildings, and maybe they can kind of, decentralize their workforce and actually be more profitable. And a lot of people are much happier working from home. So I think it's all, it's going to be, from a technology standpoint, a net gain.
Right. Well, COVID definitely brought some attention to automation that was needed particularly in the manufacturing industry. Even just communicating the way you and I are right now, it has really come to the forefront. I rarely ever have a phone call anymore that's not a video call anymore.
Yeah.
And this is just the sign of the times. But I'm interested, you talked a little bit about kind of the evolution of the wearables, like from the HoloLens to the, is it RealWear? The RealWear headset, and how that has kind of come a long way, and now it's much better for the end user. What are some of the other evolutions that you've seen? Like, how is augmented reality better now than it was, say, 5 years ago? And also, more importantly, what does the future look like for
Oh, wow.
augmented reality.
Well, how much time do you have?
We don't
But
have a lot of time, but we've got a
I
little time.
gotcha. Well, there's been a lot of increase. 5 years ago, starting at the beginning, to give myself a frame of reference, we started writing code for iQagent in 2011. And that
Okay.
was the year that the iPad 2 came out.
Wow.
Why
Okay.
didn't we do it for the iPad 1? Well, the iPad 1 didn't have a camera and it didn't have an accelerometer. So it's useless. We never even considered it. But when the iPad 2 came out, you started having a lot of features, a lot of electronic features that you could do some really great stuff with. It had a wireless connection. We had a camera. It could scan QR codes. We might could do some object recognition. And so our idea was, instead of creating an app that you can have on a desktop that does the same thing, we decided, hey, what if we could recognize a piece of equipment and just pop up useful information? And then it kind of grew from there. And so it started back with the mobiles, but, people have always kind of been working on wearables. Vuzix came out with their Vuzix glasses, and there were a few other vendors. I guess the first one of note that I used was the Google Glass.
Oh, yes,
And
right.
it had a very, very tiny screen in your peripheral vision, and you could display one piece of information. So we looked at that. They were $1,500, and we played with it. And there was actually a lot of manufacturing plants that were doing stuff with it, but you could really only display just a tiny amount of information. You couldn't read a document. Now, you could pair it with your phone and read it on your phone, but on a manufacturing plant, that's a no-no.
Right.
And so then
It's still not hands free if you're having to hold the phone.
well, it's still not hands-free, and getting into tethers where you're connected your phone to your wearable, that's also a deal breaker in manufacturing.
Yeah.
And so, when RealWear first came out, when I first saw it, I kind of dismissed it, but then as I started playing around with it, I realized, this isn't the sexiest solution, but it's probably the most practical solution out there, because it gives you just enough technology to kind of get where you need to be, which is hands-free. It was big enough to where you could read documents, you could pan and zoom, and it's also voice activated. You don't have to use your hands at all, and their voice control is very, very good. They just came out with a new headset called the Navigator 500, which is even better. I've started using that in my demonstrations. The HoloLens, which was mixed reality. Mixed reality just means augmented reality, but I can touch and I can pull and I can move stuff around. You can use gestures where RealWear doesn't have gestures. And so, the state of the art right now, you've got HoloLens 2, which is, really just a more powerful piece of hardware, with some better, technology. In the HoloLens 1, you've got RealWear, which is more assisted reality. What I think that we're going to see very quickly in the future is, we know that Apple is working on AR. They haven't come completely out and said it, but it's in the documentation. We see it writing on the wall. We see it in their patents. We see it in the companies that they've purchased. And I'm a big fan of Apple. And I think that they're going to come out with something that's got more of a form factor, a pair of eyeglasses like I'm holding up now, that's small, comfortable to wear, that will allow me to display information, in my field of vision. Now, it's probably going to pair with a phone. Right. More than likely it'll pair with a phone. But you're going to start seeing the next generation support things like gestures. Like with the HoloLens, you could pull up menus using what they call the bloom, or you could pinch and move things around, or you could tap, and it actually recognizes your hand. And it does that. It does that today. You're going to see more of that.
So almost like a touch screen where you can actually manipulate the augmented reality screen.
Yes.
That's just really floating in the air that only
That's
you can
exactly
see.
Right.
And you can manipulate it just like a tablet. Wow, that's cool.
That's exactly right. If
that's interesting.
If you guys listening want to see some videos of that, go to iQagent.com. On our video section, we've got some HoloLens that shows iQagent and HoloLens and shows how we manipulate.
Yeah.
But I think the future, I think that manufacturers or the big tech companies are going to continue to understand that manufacturing is a sweet spot. You're going to see, better gesture recognition, more comfortable headsets. And there's still some problems that have to be addressed. Safety is one of them. One of the concerns is if something pops up in your field of vision and distracts you and you get into an accident, that's not great. Now, I will tell you though that since I've started in automation and working in the plant floor, I've seen a paradigm shift in how they view technology. And so back in the day when I was starting to work with Siemens, Wonderware was running on Windows 3.1 and Windows 95. And plants, were just grudgingly saying, okay, we see the value of this, so we're finally going to allow Windows into the plant, but it's going to be on a desktop. We're not going to have a laptop computer. And then when wireless came out, they grudgingly accepted that because they recognized that mobility was very important. And now you have these workers, these white collar workers who are coming up and they're kind of in these lower to mid-level management that grew up with an iPhone, grew up with an iPad. They don't want to do without them.
Right.
And so companies have seen, like when I first marketed iQagent, a major, very, big company in pharma, and a few others, they bought a bunch of these mobile devices and then went looking for apps to run on them. Now that seems backwards, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But they recognized, hey, look, this thing's got all these features. We know it's going to be very useful on the plant floor. Let's go ahead and buy some, and then let's go find stuff that we can use it. And that that kind of certainly helped. But we were also working with an automotive manufacturer that had regulations about having cameras on the plant floor. You can't have a camera on the plant floor.
That's right.
You can't have a recording device.
I've been in some before. Yes, they're very strict about that.
But the thing is that everybody out there had an iPhone in their back pocket.
Right.
And so, when that was brought up to me, I said, hey, look, everybody out there's got a camera. So you're either not enforcing that or you recognize that times have changed. And so a lot of these companies are adopting. And so we will overcome some of the, barriers to AR, which is, a concern for safety, a concern for privacy, having more comfortable headgear. Some of the, I mentioned the tether in a lot of plants, you cannot have a physical tether.
Yeah.
They will overcome these because they know that the increase in productivity and efficiency, and the benefit, the reduced mitigation of reduced workers and things like that are going to be something that you're going to have to live with. And so I think this technology can alleviate that.
Yeah, and think back to your example of the first line, the first down line on a football field, the yellow line that indicates where the first down is. And that's something now, I don't even remember watching a football game without that now.
Right. Yes.
It's such a fabric of our lives now. This augmented reality that we didn't even know what to call it. We just called it the first down line, right? So how close are we to having some of those kinds of things in manufacturing where it's just a given that that's there and you don't even think of it as special advanced technology?
Well, the answer is always 5 years. But
I guess
it's really going to, it's going to be driven by the hardware because, I have a saying that the litmus test of a great AR app is that when you use it, your first thought is, hey, look, augmented reality. Your first thought is, wow, I know what that is, or you don't even think about it.
Right.
Like the first down light.
Exactly.
I don't even think about it. I know exactly what it is.
Right.
And if we had hardware that was accepted, that was safe, that was comfortable, that was non-intrusive, we would already have this. Consider an operator sitting in a manufacturing line and then they just see information, maybe, an outline around or, a circle and a red slash around a component indicating this in the wrong place. It would not take long at all for that to be pervasive, but it's going to be driven by the hardware. And it's also going to be driven by the acceptance of the plants. But, I do see, there's a ton of people working on this. Apple's pouring in just a crazy amount of money. Google is, Microsoft certainly is. So I think that, once the hardware, we get that singularity where our hardware is there and the acceptance is there. There's an organization called Area that's been helping work on addressing some of the barriers and some of the things with getting acceptance of augmented reality into the plant, addressing some of the safety concerns, creating standards for writing AR applications, so that once you have standards, then that's going to lead to acceptance. And so, you know, I still think we're a couple of years out from that level of acceptance, probably 5. And I'm just I'm excited to see some of the hardware that we know is coming out, and we've been looking forward to Apple for a long time. Now, Microsoft just announced, or at least it was in the news, that the HoloLens 3 has been canceled, and they're going a different direction. I think with Samsung, where Samsung's going to be doing the hardware side, they're still interested in it. They're still in the business. It's just, I think they've kind of reached the apex of that, and I was kind of disappointed to see that. But there's a ton of people working on this, and and it's going to do, I think, nothing but help the industry. I'm impatient for it to get here.
Yeah, I think it's hard to have a conversation about the factory of the future without mentioning the term augmented reality these days. It seems like it's forefront of people's minds that want to look into the future and see what that factory of the future looks like.
Absolutely.
This is such an interesting conversation, and we're kind of getting to the end of our time, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to have the last word and just tell us maybe anything that you wanted to talk about, anything else that maybe I wasn't smart enough to ask you about augmented reality, and also about your company, about iQagent and what you do for manufacturers.
All right. Well, thank you. I think we did a pretty good job of covering everything. I could probably talk about it all day, but augmented reality and some of the adjacent technologies that are coming to the plant floor, they are certainly coming, and I think that the accelerated adoption of technology by the plants is going to help us. But I think, there's always this question of, is it going to take jobs away, or should we be concerned about this? And I go back to the knowledge gap, and one of the things that I hear from customer to customer is, we're losing our skilled workers.
That's
You've
right.
got a guy that's retiring, a lady that's retiring, that you cannot quantify all that they know. And augmented reality, the way it's used to alleviate that is, and I've seen this work exactly like this, where you say, okay, here's a procedure that you've been doing for 20 years. I'm going to film you doing this procedure, and then we're going to compile that into an edited video, and then we're going to assign it to this point of interest. And then anybody at any time can watch you do this procedure when they need to know. And so, it's very inefficient to, hey, let's create this 6-hour course where you go sit in the classroom and you do this, because now we've got a large number of people sitting in the classroom learning something that they're probably not going to use for 6 months. And it's a waste of time, maybe not 100% waste of time, but training costs a lot in terms of, lost production. People that are sitting and training are not out producing. What augmented reality allows us to do with this gap is to take what we call just-in-time training or just-in-time knowledge and put it exactly where we need it. And some of the finer points, like PTC, great company doing some really great stuff with augmented reality and Vuforia, where they could sit down, like say it's a jet engine, and show someone how to install something, and very accurately and finely, just show them exactly what to do. You limit your training time. And so, it's not something, to be afraid of from a standpoint of, someone losing their job. I think it's actually going to enhance the jobs that are available. When we have technology like this, it tends to create even more jobs, because you've got people that publish, the AR, that they work on the information, they collate the information. There's a lot of opportunity for that. And so I just want to kind of point that out to people to kind of alleviate that fear, because I do see it. And it's a technology that I really believe in, and I've been intensely interested in, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to talk with you about it today.
Absolutely. And that enthusiasm shows. It gets me excited too, because I love to see all this new kind of George Jetson type stuff coming out.
I still want my flying car.
Yeah,
by the way.
exactly. I think one of these days when we're in our flying cars going to the plant floor to manufacture things, we're going to remember this conversation. But also, I love this idea of filming the veterans that have all this tribal knowledge, and because they may not be that great in front of a classroom, but put them in front of a piece of equipment and you can glean so much knowledge just by having them do their thing, just watching them do what they do. And if you film that, people really can learn, and that kind of captures that tribal knowledge that we are losing. And we've been talking about this for decades.
That's a great point, because if they've been doing it for 20 years, it is a lot more natural for them to be there doing it and just, pointing out the things that they feel are important. And it keeps them involved in it, and I've also heard that it's a lot more personal, them kind of giving their legacy, if you will, to a place that they were for so long, that's going to live on, even after, they can know as they're retired, hey, a lot of my knowledge is still, in that plant personally. And I think that's a good thing, because it gives them, a sense of, I guess, pride and worth and commitment, to what they've done. So I definitely have seen that as people have kind of done that. So that's a fantastic point.
Yes, I love that. That's a great way to end it. I really appreciate you being here, Bob, and sharing with us this great technology that iQagent has developed. And I know we'll be hearing a lot more from you in the future. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle. It's been certainly been a pleasure, been the best part of my day. Thank you.
My pleasure. This brings us to the end of the show. Thank you so much for listening. Please do me a favor and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. If you have interesting information to share and want to contact me about being a guest on a future episode of this podcast, please send me an email at michelle@navigatecontent.com. You can also send me questions that I will have my expert guests answer for you on a future episode. And in the meantime, please check out my book series on modern manufacturing to read more than 30 real-world case studies about how global companies are using smart technology and innovation to build the factory of the future. All the links to the books and articles mentioned in this podcast are in the show notes. Have a great week, and please join me for the next episode of Factory of the Future.